Make sure that we're recording. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so let's start with inspections today as we are talking about inspections and appraisal. The first thing I want to start with is setting expectations for your buyer and your seller here in a minute around inspections. I think this is an important part of things, and it's going to also be a way that you can add and help make it to where you're keeping the process moving. A lot of times, guys, we want to make sure that we are not a bottleneck and moving forward in the process. One of those things is a lot of times homeowner or your buyer, your client, maybe has not bought a home before, maybe hasn't bought a home for a while. And so they're going to often look for you for resources for an inspector, for the multiple different types of inspections that they may very well do. Well, note, if you can be more efficient and get that information to them sooner, they're likely to get them scheduled sooner, and then you're likely to conduct them sooner, and you're able to get through that inspection period sooner, which makes your life and their life so much better, because it is a time in which there's a lot of high anxiety. Just, is there going to be anything major, that kind of a thing. And it's on both sides of the table, because during that inspection period, unless the buyer has completely waived their right to renegotiate, and they've said that they are going to use that in its present condition addendum and select box 2 on it that says they're going to, or 3, saying that they're going to continue and they're doing inspections, but they're continuing regardless. During the inspection period, if that has not been checked on that addendum and that addendum hasn't been used, then a buyer can cancel the contract for any reason, and they don't have to tell the seller why. They do have to provide a copy of a professional inspection report. So it's not where Uncle Joe can go over and take a look at the house and say, oh, no, this isn't good, and then they cancel it, right? It does have to be a professional inspector. Now, with that said, it doesn't have to be a full-blown inspection. And guys, it's not good business practice, but if for any reason somebody is like, you know what, and it is, it's also you being an advocate for your client. So if someone says, gosh, I don't know that I want to pay for the full blown inspections, which can be anywhere from $600 to $800 to $1,000 if the foundation on this really isn't good. So it'd be okay for you to start your inspections with just doing a structural inspection, right? Or if there was ever a time that you're in a pickle, you just have to do a inspection. So it doesn't have to be the full gamut of things. And then you can provide, I've seen where contracts were canceled before because there weren't extensions on downspouts or a doorknob was loose. But like, again, it was a simple inspection. Inspection was conducted and the buyer wanted to cancel, nothing the seller can do about it. So that's why we celebrate when we get it under contract a little bit. And then we really celebrate when we get through inspections, both on the buyer side and the seller side. So my biggest recommendation to you would be to make sure that you take the time to put together a really good email template that you can prepare and send out to your clients immediately upon going under inspection, or I'm sorry, going under contract. Partly because as soon as, the ink or the electronic ink will not even be dry on the contract, and you are going to have your buyer going, okay, now we need to schedule those inspections. Who do we call? So let's start there. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This is an email template that I used for years and years and years. I often wondered if clients who purchased with me more than once through the years were aware of the fact that I was using the same email template over and over again. The way that I would recommend you setting up an email template is, and you can do this in Google and save it to your templates. I'm more than happy to send or share the training that I have, kind of walking you through how to create email templates in Google or elsewhere. But the way I often would set up that email template, anything you see here in red was prompting me to go in and customize it for that particular consumer, that particular client. So obviously I'm going to change the name to be their name. I then would also go ahead and update the stuff in red below. So just a cute little one-liner saying, woohoo, I hope you're dancing and excited, to be under contract, congratulations. And then I did leave it bold. I did change all the red at the end to be black so that it didn't look obvious that it's an email template and I'm just filling in the blanks. But This paragraph was super important, and the reason being is it helped to give them something to reference later, because it's a very exciting time. There's a lot of stuff going on. You as an agent will often forget what is the last day of that inspection period. And just as much as it's important that a buyer can cancel a contract for any reason within that 10-day inspection period, if that's what you put in the contract term, it is negotiable, and that is a field we fill out in the contract. But just as much as that's important, if you happen to make it to 12:01 on day 11 and you haven't sent over an inspection notice to the listing agent, then the buyer is accepting the property as is, and the seller does not need to renegotiate any repairs on the property. So it's extremely important that it's clear to you what the last day of that inspection period, and it's clear to your clients what the last day of the inspection period is. I would recommend that at the same time that you're sending out this email template, that you're going and adding a reminder to your calendar of what the last day of the inspection period is. As you go through your career, I kid you not, there'll be multiple nights that you'll shoot up in bed and go, okay, wait, oh, hold on. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and be counting out what day of the inspection period you're on. This is a way to just kind of calm those nerves, so it's kind of in front of you and you know exactly what day to hit. Note that day 1 of the inspection period is the day after everybody signs all the papers. So with this paragraph, I would put your next steps, as we discussed, are to conduct inspections per the contract. If she signs the paperwork today, Monday, 12/31/2018, this will be our effective date. You have until Thursday, 11/10 to complete inspections, get bids if you desire, and/or cancel the contract. This would be the last day of your 10-day inspection period. No, if I knew that the other party had already signed it today, the 31st of December, then I wouldn't put if she signs today. I would just put Monday the 12/31 is our effective date. And then you would have until this date to do your inspections. Does that make sense? And again, I'm updating it if I made it a 7-day inspection period to reflect that it's a 7-day inspection period.
Okay, and if you were doing 10 days, 12/31, it would be 1/10, right? Not 11/10.
Yes, good point, Krista. And I will clean this up because I think this is something that I've modified a number of times and then might have quickly printed it to PDF for y'all. So
no problem. I just wanted to make sure.
Again, you get like bonus points for being star student.
I don't mean to call you out. I just want to make sure I understand.
No, exactly. Yep. Nope, you're exactly right. And I know it's a lot of stuff's in the details, guys, and in getting the correct dates on here. So I apologize if the sample has incorrect dates. But I often would include the day of the week, right? So I'm saying Monday, 12/31, and then I would be saying Thursday, 1/10 or whatever that might be, right? And the reason being is that I want to make sure that we're driving, that they're not confused that the 10th of January isn't Wednesday or Friday or whatever that might be. And I know a little detail, but it will really help and keep you from getting text messages and phone calls of like, hey, wait a minute, what's the last day of our inspection period? The other piece that's really important there is that they understand that they have until the 10th to complete their inspections. And so oftentimes they'd say, gosh, we really like that second inspector on the list, but he couldn't get us in until the 8th. Is that going to give us enough time? It kind of lights a little fire under them to like get it done and make sure that they've got plenty of time to conduct them all. All right, I'm not going to read everything for you word for word, and I am going to share this template with you so that you can modify it however you would like. And include different inspectors that you would like and such, but I've got an editable version of it, or I've already included that with you all. You should have it in the email that I sent out on Wednesday or Thursday. Okay, so next it just talks about general inspections, some suite, some specialist inspections. A lot of this came from me typing out the same cover your yourself kind of lines that make sure that we're covered as agents, saying, hey, you get to pick the inspector. Here's some suggestions of people I like that I've worked with before, but it's all the way completely up to you what inspections you do and who you work with, just to make sure that nobody ever comes back and says, well, you gave us that inspector, Elizabeth, and it's your fault that they didn't catch X, Y, and Z. You're just offering them resources because many a times they don't know of an inspector, and you're risking them either going to Google to find an inspector, which is a complete and total nightmare 89% of the time, or they're going and asking somebody at work. And again, you don't know who that inspector is. You don't know if they do a good, thorough job. And so it's really nice for you to try to set yourself up for success, to be working with someone that you know is thorough and you understand their process, that kind of a thing. Okay, so here's a list of, again, just like I do with the lenders, I put in here kind of home inspectors I'd recommend. I often put my favorite towards the top in hopes that they'll work with them. There's different costs that are associated with each inspector. They charge different things. With the general home inspector, I will tell you that most of them will do the whole home inspection. They will do a termite inspection for you, or they will coordinate with a termite inspector on your behalf. So it's like they handle both of those. They also often will have the ability to schedule your sewer line inspection if your client wants to do a sewer line inspection as well. So that's your whole home, and we'll go through a sample whole home report, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what you should be doing during the inspection as an excellent agent. Then I often would include specialist inspectors. This is where I would include like a structural engineer, a chimney person, the sewer scan people, those kinds of things. And then if there's anything that was like necessary because of the particular property, like a roofer or something of that sort, I would often handle that like outside of this. If we knew that the roof might be kind of sketch and they want to get an idea of how many years are actually left in it, I'd say, hey, I can send my roofer over there and they'll hop on the roof and give us an idea. Most of the time, your roofer is not going to charge you anything to hop on a roof and tell you if it's got life left in it or not. All right, any questions before we move on from here?
I have a question. So the 10 days, or if you shorten it to 7, you have to get the inspections done, get the report back, which is usually the next day, and make a decision if you want to cancel within that 10 days or 7 days. Okay.
Yes. And I would add to that, Krista, too. Yes. So you have to do all of that within that 10 days by 11:59 p.m. on day 10, if it's a 10-day inspection period. And I wouldn't leave it to the last minute, but yes, you've got to do all of that. Sometimes, Krista, and it will be into your benefit, if you are asking the seller to, let's say, replace an electrical panel or put on a new roof or do something of that sort. A lot of times as a buyer's agent, sometimes it's easier to go to them with, hey, I went ahead and got an estimate for replacing the electrical panel, and it looks like that's going to be $1,800. Here's a copy of the bid and who we're asking that you use to do that work. It makes it a little bit easier for them to swallow. It also puts you in control of who's doing the work. So guys, this is, again, as an agent, it's a little bit of you being proactive and you being a good agent to where you showed them the house and you're like, this thing is held together with duct tape. Like, this is going to be a real interesting inspection, right? Like, there might be a lot of stuff that comes up. Well, then I would be highly encouraging your A, I would write the inspection period for 10 days. B, I would be encouraging your clients to do those inspections early in the inspection period so that you've got plenty of time to get people out there to give you bids and give you estimates on what things are going to cost. Whether you're using those for your clients' knowledge so that they can do the work after closing, or if you're going to use it for negotiations. Now, are there going to be times that unfortunately inspectors are busy, or there's vacations, or there's some reason why things aren't lining up and you have to do an inspection, let's say on day 8, and you have to send over a resolution and request that things be...
This is Lisa Winkler, and
Yeah.
I called to cancel, and I did that days ago, and I'm not seeing that back on my credit card, so I'm going to check and see what credit card you maybe put it on.
I'm sorry, I think you're not on mute, so I'm going to mute you, okay? Because I think that you might be. Let's do that. We'll do that. Excellent. Okay. I was like, we're not charging for these classes. Okay, not really. Okay, excellent. So I'm sorry, I lost where I was for just a second, guys. Okay, there are going to be times where you may very well have to do an inspection on the end of, at the end of the inspection period and send over a resolution where maybe you're asking for something and the other agent, and you don't have bids yet. That is okay too. You can still say, hey, I'm sending over this resolution that we want the main electrical panel updated because there's issues with it. Note that I have an electrician that could come out on Friday and give us a bid at 10 a.m. if that's okay. And I've got another person that could come out on Saturday at 1 p.m. So you don't absolutely have to have it at that point when you send over the inspection notice and resolution. It's helpful if you know you're going to have a lot of things, and it's helpful to be a team player when there are things like that that need to be done. It is not super helpful when you just dump it all on the listing agent or like, here's a list of 6 things that we want done. Good luck getting bids with that. And like, also you're putting, as an agent, you want to make sure that you're kind of trying to be helpful and be in control of who's doing those repairs. Okay. So that would be my recommendation when it comes to the timing of things on those inspections. I want to share too, kind of on the seller side of things, setting expectations for a seller just real briefly. This is the email template, like very wordy, right guys? I like my words. So on the seller side, I often would send out expectations for inspections too, just because I would often get similar questions over and over again. And the more proactive you can be about answering questions and setting expectations, a lot less of the time are you going to get reactive, or you're going to get those text messages, those phone calls, and that anxiety of your client being high. So and with a seller, if you're setting expectations and you're being proactive, like their questions are already being answered and they're feeling like they're being guided through the experience, and it's a great experience, and they recommend it, you know, their friends. Okay, so when setting expectations for the sellers, it's the same kind of thing. I'm going to set on the second paragraph expectations around when that inspection period is over. Okay, so similar thing. Since everyone signed the paperwork and it was delivered on Monday, the XX will be our effective date, and the buyer will have until this date to complete inspections, get bids, or cancel the contract without your permission. This is the last day of the 10-day inspection period. So again, I don't want to scare my sellers, but I do need to make sure that they're very clear. They don't need to be going posting all over social media that they sold their house and they're like, all is good and like rainbows and sunshine, we're moving on, because we're not quite yet, right? Only if box 2 or is checked on that as is addendum in its present condition addendum. All right, here I'm just saying I'm going to let you know whenever they get things scheduled, and I'll keep you posted. And that a lot of times that agents try to get everything onto one day for inspections. And yet there's times where we might have one day for some of the inspections and then another day that they have to come back. I do highly recommend that you set an expectation around how long inspections might take, whether it's because your clients work from home or because they have animals that they're going to get out and such. But setting the expectation that it could be at least like anywhere from 2 to 4.5 hours is good. Otherwise, they might assume that it's going to only be a couple hours, and then they're starting to freak out. Why are they still there, Elizabeth? Why has it been 4 hours? What's going on? Is there something wrong? Kind of a thing. Okay. I do put a little bit here on radon to set expectations around radon, because sometimes as a listing agent, you might get a phone call that the inspector wants to drop off that radon mitigation system prior to inspections. Typically, they run those for 48 hours prior, to picking up the results. And it's awesome when you've got an inspector that'll drop it off ahead of time. So day of inspections, you know what your radon level is. And again, a general home inspector can do the radon testing for you as well. Okay. Oftentimes people will ask you, sellers are going to ask you, like, what do I need to do? What do I need to get ready for inspections? Like, is there anything I can do? Well, your house has been on the market and the buyers have already seen it. Like, no, there's no time to like go around and try to fix a whole, like majorly big stuff. But what I do like to tell them, and a good thing for you, is clear out and make sure that there's access to the electrical panel in the basement, and that a buyer inspector can see the walls, that kind of thing. So a lot of times I'm giving expectations around make sure there's access to things. If you've got attic access in your closet of your primary bedroom, be sure to clear out the shelves so that the inspector can get a ladder up there and get up in the attic and see stuff in the attic. I can't tell you the number of times as a buyer's agent did not feel comfortable about it, but it was like, man, we're not coming back out here. I got too busy of a week, and I'm pulling clothes out of a closet carefully and making it to where an inspector can get up and look in the attic. Now, some buyer's agents won't do that. I wouldn't recommend doing it unless it's by all means like a must. But that's why it's always helpful if your clients do that ahead of time. And they're welcome to just lay the stuff on the bed. Like, it doesn't have to be put perfectly away. All right. Next thing, another item is removing pets. I highly recommend, if possible, that you get your sellers to remove pets from the house for inspections. Like, I will say cats are usually not as big of a deal if they're friendly. If they're going to bolt out the door, let's get them out of there, because an inspector is focusing on inspecting the house and not, did they leave the front door open too long and the cat bolt down the street. So I would take into consideration, you know, the animal. With dogs though, if it's a dog, I would highly recommend if you could get them to doggy daycare or the kennel, or stay with a family member or friend during inspections, especially if they're going to be barking, but also it's a distraction. And if they're barking, it puts people on edge. And the last thing you want to do when you have people in your house looking at all of the things that are wrong with your house, every last little detail of them, is to have a barking dog just barking for 2 to 4.5 hours. It puts the level of on edge just even higher. Not what you want to do. Oftentimes, if there was any pushback, I would like explain that to them and they'd say, oh, no problem. They can go to, the dog can go to my parents tomorrow. Okay. They also will often ask if they should stay for the inspection and let the inspector in. So setting expectations around, nope, the buyer's agent's going to be there and let the inspector in, and there's no need for you to stick around. And it would be greatly beneficial if you did not stick around. Do not let your sellers be there for inspections to greet the buyers. Not a good idea. Like they got like where they start talking about stuff or nodding like, oh yeah, like I know that like the fence gate thing here needs to be blah, 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 something needs to be done. Like we can take care of that. And they're like promising to do things they don't need to do, and or saying stuff that they don't need to say. And not that you're trying to hide anything, but like people don't need to be talking. Make sense? Okay. And then this next section is where I am going to reiterate what can happen after inspections. Again, we're going to address this if there is an in its present condition addendum used. So the buyer can purchase the house as is, they can cancel the contract, or they can offer to renegotiate. At this point, I'm just going in this last paragraph that is stating kind of what can happen with that, and then that renegotiation period piece. Most of the time, this would help with setting enough expectations that I didn't get a phone call. For my real nervous Nelly clients, I would get a phone call and then I'd have the ability to address any concerns. And I would let them know as a listing agent, it was always my practice to attend the summary of the inspection. So most of home inspectors are going to go around and do a full inspection of the property. And then at the end, they're going to gather with the buyers and the buyer's agent and go over a high-level summary of the defects in the property. As a listing agent, you can request to be present for that. I mean, technically, you could be present for the entire inspection. I wouldn't recommend that. It's always good to give the buyer and their agent some space in the home. But oftentimes, it's just reaching out to the buyer's agent and saying, great, you're going to conduct your inspections on Thursday at 1 p.m. When do you think you'll be ready for the summary? Would 3:30 sound about good for me to stop by? Does that sound like when you guys, your inspector will be ready for that? I'd just like to stop by for the summary and then I'll get out of there. So any questions about that? And I'll elaborate a little bit more. Oftentimes you will find some agents, this practice when it first started, and it started probably a decade ago, threw a lot of agents off and they're like, wait, what? You're going to come to the summary? And now it's pretty common practice that a listing agent might show up to the summary of the inspection. If I ever got pushback from the other agent, I often would just explain, I just want to come by. I'm going to be fly on the wall. If there's an issue, it's so much easier for me to be able to explain it to the sellers, hearing it firsthand from the inspector. And if we need to, address anything, it's just really helpful there. So again, I will be super out of the way and we'll just step in for the summary. Oftentimes that day when I arrive, I pop in and say, are we still thinking 3:30 for that summary? Awesome. I'll be out my car. If it's going to be any sooner, just feel free to shoot me a text or something of that sort. And I really truly gave the buyer and the buyer's agent space. Now, there were times where they would be like, no, come on in, sit down, like we're having a great time. And they were totally fine with me hanging out in the house with them. I waited for that invitation. They extended the invitation, I took it. Oftentimes, even if you're just there for the brief summary portion, part of the reason that you're there as the listing agent, full disclosure, is to see if there's an issue with the main plumbing stack in the basement and I have to talk to a plumber about it. I want to say this is exactly where he said there was concern, and this is here to here is where he thought it needed to be replaced. I want to be able to do that at a high level for my sellers. The other reason why it's helpful to be there for the inspection is that you get a read on the buyers. If the buyers are sitting there placing their furniture and they are like in good spirits and you get a good feel, like not a lot's going to shake these guys. They're in love with the house, like kind of a thing. And that does help sometimes with negotiations if you need it, right? The other times you'll see that there is a nervous Nelly sitting at the dining room table and listening to all the things from the inspection. And as a listing agent, you can tell, uh-oh, we might be in trouble. That is one of the best inspection summaries I've ever heard. And that, unfortunately, that buyer was sweating bullets and freaking out. We might have somebody that is like having cold feet on us. And the reason that, not that you're going to say anything in the moment, and not that there's anything you can do to stop that if that buyer is going to cancel got cold feet and is going to cancel the contract. And yet your sellers are going to greatly appreciate that you get to get back to your car and either give them a summary of some of the major things that came up, or a summary of, guys, this is a great inspection. Like there was a couple minor things like this, and this. And you give them like immediate feedback, which is really helpful for them and they're very grateful for, because it is a high anxiety thing. Or you get to get back in the car and say, hey guys, I wanted full disclosure, not sure what's going to happen. I'm going to communicate with the other agent, but the buyer did seem a little anxious and such. So I will keep you posted, kind of a thing, but you've got instant feedback to give your seller. And a lot of times too, I'm in that appointment. We'll talk about as a buyer's agent where you're taking notes, but same as a listing agent at that summary, I've got my notebook and I'm just taking notes of the big ticket items, like not, oh, there's a leaky sink in the primary bathroom. I'm going, oh, okay, so we've got, the roof has got only 4 years left and it might need, it's got hail damage, or kind of some of those major things that I can report back to my sellers. We're going to get a copy of the inspection report and I let them know that I'll send that over, kind of a thing. So any questions there as a listing agent for inspections? Your sellers do have to give the buyers access to the property through the inspection period. We spoke earlier about how if we need to get bids and that kind of stuff, and we go past our inspection period for that, you can, but it has to be at the grace of the sellers. The only time that they have to provide access is during the inspection period. So during the renegotiation period, you want to send somebody else over to look at something, the sellers can decline that. And sometimes they will, like, no, I'm not going to have you have another inspector. You've already sent your inspection notice over. Why are you having another inspector come over and look at X, Y, and Z? Or why are you having another electrician come over and look at X, Y, and Z? Just note that if we do go past the inspection period. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the actual inspection and what you might want to consider doing during that inspection. So as a buyer's agent, so let's put our buyer's agent hat back on. And at the inspection as a buyer's agent, it is a time for your client to be back in the house. They're going to be taking a second look at it, depending on how fast you had to make a decision the first time and how many times they got to look at it and how long they were actually in the property. Things look a lot different when you go back, right? Like when you're in that like honeymoon stage, when you first go and look at a property, and yet when you go back, it's like, oh gosh, like the trim in this house is a little more like nicked up than I remember it being, right? Or gosh, the hardwood floors are in a little worse shape than I thought. Just be prepared that your clients may very well go back and have some strong emotions or some strong feelings about how it doesn't look as pretty, almost like when you've got like, I guess I shouldn't go there. Almost like when you go on a date in a bar and it's dark and it's like, oh, like they're looking really great, right? And maybe you've had a few. And then the next day you're in the broad daylight and you're like, wait a minute, that is not what I recall, right? So I did just go there. Anywho, be prepared for that and note that it is a time for them to go and measure stuff. So you often would want to encourage them that if they're concerned about their big couch fitting in this living room in this new place, to be prepared to measure stuff. Now measuring every dang wall isn't necessary. Taking extra pictures because, and that's something that you can encourage them. Hey guys, while we are here, I know that the photos the listing agent has online are great, but there are a couple, if you want any additional angles of any rooms for placing furniture later, now would be a great time to get that. I would recommend that you have a tape measure that you keep in your car, because the number of times you're going to be asked if you have a tape measure, or the number of times you can say, oh, yep, I got one, let me go get it. Be sure to keep one of those in your car. I would highly recommend branding it to yourself in some way, even if that's just with a Sharpie, so that you know, or they know that they've got your tape measure if they happen to walk off with it at the end of the day. During that inspection time too, it's a great time to measure for fridges or for washer and dryer, and it's helpful for you to remember that. Otherwise, you might be making an extra trip later to measure for those things. But really, I would say follow their lead. If they want to go around and look at stuff and and you can tell that their body language that they're a little anxious, use the time to help calm them in that and reassure them, kind of a thing. And if they're just joyful and want to go around and be happy, like, I am so excited for you, kind of a thing, right? I would highly recommend that you stay positive, and depending on what inspector you're working with, it may be where they don't do a summary at the very end. I would learn that pretty quickly. Sometimes it's overwhelming for a buyer, and or if there's major things, your inspector might throughout the entire inspection, instead of waiting to the end, might say, hey guys, why don't you come take a look at this? Or like your general home inspector is doing the whole home inspection and you guys are hanging out, measuring, taking photos, like dancing and being excited by the fact that they actually finally went under contract. And the sewer line inspector is going to come in during that time. The wood destroying insect, the termite inspector is going to come in, right, during the time that the whole home inspector is walking around. And so those are going to be reports that you're going to get throughout the time you're waiting for the inspection to be completed. And sometimes that can be overwhelming if you're not there to help brace them. If the wood destroying, if the termite inspector says, oh guys, I see some previous damage here, it looks like it was treated, all is good, is making sure that you're staying on top of, okay, so what I hear you saying is that we have no issues here, you're not calling for treatment, it looks like there was issues before, but they've taken care of those in the past, so we're good. So make sure that you're listening to what you're hearing, and as the agent, it is okay, and again, your responsibility to help make sure that you're saying, so what I hear you saying is this, and helping to make sure that you're reframing and clarifying in clear terms for your buyer that, hey, everything's okay here. He did say there was previous damage, but all is good. Same thing with like the sewer line inspections. Sometimes those can be really hairy and like not so great. Feel free. Sometimes it's going to be like, oh, it's clean as a whistle, all is good. Sometimes it's going to be, there's a little offset in your sewer line. And I can show you, let's do that. Let me show you the wood destroying insect. I pulled an example of that up. So let's get back to here. And then, where do I have the wood destroying insects? Maybe I should have found it before I pulled it up. Okay. Let me find it real quick, guys. Oh, I know, I downloaded it. I haven't pulled it up yet. Let me get that. Any questions while I'm pulling this up, guys? No, there's hydro. All right. Okay, so here's your wood destroying insect report. They typically, some inspectors are going to give you it on the spot. Note that you need to keep that because you've got to send a copy of it to the listing agent if they do give you one in hand. But typically they're going to go over and say either that there's no visible evidence of wood destroying insects or that there is visible evidence of it. An important place to take it if there appears to be any structural damage from it. And then this section 3 is the recommendations, and that's going to see where you're going to see whether or not treatment is required for it. And so here we're saying no treatment's required. If treatment is required, they're going to check the other box and then provide with you what they suggest. Sometimes the termite inspectors are going to give you a bid themselves for them to do it. Note, the only time a termite inspection report costs money is when you're in a real estate transaction. Otherwise, typically, termite companies are going to come out and be willing to do a inspection for you annually or biannually if you're not in the process of selling your home. And then the rest of it here just states where there's evidence of things that they see that might have occurred.
Hey, Elizabeth, I have a question.
Sure.
And I don't know if you know this, and this might not be the right, but it came up, it made me think about it. So I have had a couple of VA loan situations, and I am still confused on who has to pay for the termite inspection and any treatment. Do you know off the top of your head if that has to be the buyer or does it have to be the seller? I have been told both things and I'm still confused.
My understanding on it is that it needs to be the seller that pays for the termite inspection on a VA.
Okay, that's what I
and
was
yet
told too.
Yes, Krista, and yet I've not been involved in that in a detailed level recently. So that would be a great thing, I would say, for us to find out from Randy. He'd be your best resource on it.
Okay, great.
Sometimes, Krista, what will happen is that the buyer will pay for the termite inspection, and then the seller has to, like, you'll have to go back to the inspector and say, okay, here, I need a receipt for it, and then can you give a credit, and then it'll be paid out of closing.
Okay.
Like the title company is going to pay the inspector, and then the inspector is going to give a credit back to your buyer on their credit card or whatever form of payment they have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay, so then the sewer line inspection, I would say wood destroying inspector, you don't need to follow them around. Let them come in and do their business. They'll come get you and let you know if there's anything you need to look at, like they will with their flashlight, and they'll say, okay, why don't you guys come down here in the basement? I want to show you here on the rafters what happened, kind of a thing, right? They'll also point out, and oftentimes if you ever see that there's holes drilled about, like, I don't know, 6 to 8 to 12 inches apart or in concrete around a house, like on the front stoop, or maybe along a patio or along the back or along the driveway, that's evidence of it being treated previously for termites, just FYI. Okay, so then the sewer inspection. Oftentimes they know what they're doing too, and they're going to be just fine. They'll bring in their equipment, which is like this huge like pipe, like of the camera they use for the camera, and set up their camera system. But they're going to go down to the basement likely and get stuff set up to do the sewer line inspection. It is one that I recommend kind of hanging out with and being around for. As an agent, sometimes you get to be a helper when it comes to the sewer inspection. And what I mean by that is sometimes if the sewer line has not been inspected before, it's been a while, that like cap on it will be hard to get off, or they can't find it. And so assisting them with finding it if it's a difficult one. Every once in a while, you'll run into an issue where they won't either be able to access it because of cap and they don't want to like break it off, or it'll be in a location that they, like sometimes split level houses, guys, they'll need to actually like pull a toilet to be able to conduct the inspection on a sewer line. So don't freak out if that happens. It happens every once in a while. That's a story for another day. And yet I do like to be a helpful person, and because you want to kind of hang out, they're going to go down, they're going to set up their computer, and then they're going to get their like camera that's just basically on this really long pipe, and then they're going to just start shoving it down the pipe, and they're going to go all the way out to the main with it if possible. Sometimes that will get stuck along the way because either there's debris in the sewer line or because there's offsets, and this is where you get to be helpful, and they're going to like be more than willing to ask you for help. They might say, can you go turn the sink on upstairs for me in the kitchen and turn that water on, because that water coming down into the pipe will help carry the camera along sometimes, right? Or can you go flush a toilet for me? And then you're gonna, go run and flush a toilet, kind of a thing. And another reason, so that's one reason why I like to kind of be, there and helpful for that inspector. The other reason is you don't want to miss if there's an issue. Hydrophysics is wonderful. I will totally plug them. Sewer doctors is another one that I really enjoy working with. And they often will come get you before they start pulling it out. But basically, they're going to take that camera and they're going to try to get it all the way to the city main. And then they typically will record as they're pulling the camera back into, like back in. And that's where they're going to hit record and start recording. Now, each one is different. And some of those recordings pick up your voice too. Some of them do not pick up the voice of the people in the room. Just be aware of that. There's been times where agents have been incredibly embarrassed about what they were saying. And if there is an issue, multiple people might be watching that video. So just be very thoughtful of what you're saying when they're recording and pulling that camera back through, just FYI. Okay, so then as they're pulling it back and they're recording, they are going to pause anytime that there's a break in the line, anytime that there's an offset, and you are able to ask questions then, but it's nice to be able to see that firsthand, so that if you do want to ask for clarification of like, hey, is this offset big enough that we would need to, that we have got an issue? Even going out, sometimes it's super exciting because you're like, come on, get to the city main, come on, no whammies, no whammies, no whammies. And you want to get out to the city main and not have a break in it. But times that there is a break in it or an offset or total blockage, and that total blockage could be because it's not been cleaned out and there's roots in it. And really, if you just have someone come out and clean the line with like a blade, and they'll recommend having someone come clean the line and then recammering it. And that's not the end of the world. Like that happens and that's okay. But a lot of times if there's a break or an offset, they're gonna stop the camera, whether it's going out or coming back in. And you can often ask them to mark it in the yard and show you in the yard where exactly it's broken. So they're gonna go out with a tool that's gonna like go and track where the camera is, and then like a flag a lot of times, or spray paint. It's very important that you're present for that and that you're able to go out and see exactly where it is. Is there a big tree in the way? Is there a driveway in the way? But if you're helping get bids for replacing or fixing this sewer line, then you really want to be able to tell them, okay, this is exactly where they said that offset is. And they're going to tell you what location it is. Hopefully they're able to find that. And then they also can tell you how deep it is. And with sewer line repairs, you want to understand, are you 4 feet down or 6 feet down, or are you like 20 feet down? Because that's going to make a big difference in the cost to repairing it. Okay, this is what a sample of this report sometimes looks like. It looks like a different language by all means, but it's just kind of breaking down what the location and where transitions are at. The comments for hydrophysics, they will do and explain in their comments a little bit here. All of the ones that I've ever worked with do include a video so you can watch. I mean, it's not the most pleasant thing, and yet it's necessary, guys. So they're going to have either a full-on video, or you're going to get pictures of what each of the different things are. So if there was an issue, they're going to say at 95 feet, there's this issue or blockage or that. Guys, it is pretty grotesque, and I will at times, and I will highly recommend again, that we're watching what we're saying while it's going on, because it could be being captured. And you can ask the inspector, does this pick up our voices, if you'd like. But the other thing is that there's home sewer line and insurance. And so sometimes an inspector is going to say, I would recommend getting the roots cleaned out of it and then using a root killer, annually or whatnot, and then putting sewer line insurance on it. As a homeowner, you need to have sewer line insurance in place, typically at least 30 days prior to something being discovered. So when you're listing a property, I highly recommend, if your sellers don't already have sewer line inspection and it's in an area that there's issues, or that it's an old sewer line, having them put it on in plenty of time before inspections would occur. And note that that sewer line inspection and insurance doesn't always cover everything. Okay, any questions on sewer inspections? This is again where we want to keep people calm. It is one of those things that if there's a major sewer line break, any buyer is likely going to want that repaired, kind of thing. So keep people calm in that sense. It is never a good day though when you're like, man, we got to deal with this, darn it. Okay, moving on here. So this is a summary of or this is an example of what a whole home inspection looks like. Sweet Home Inspections is someone I worked with for years. His process is to go and do the whole home inspection, and then he actually walks you around the exterior and then walks you around the entire interior and shows you all the good and the bad. So it's kind of nice that he'll say, oh, they used really really great siding on this house. This is hardy board siding that was an upgrade, or and show you not only the bad but the good. And he's literally walking around the house to do that. Some inspectors are going to do the report summary like in the kitchen with you, and they've got pictures printed out, or they're just reading through it. It's a personal preference. I preferred walking around because it was just easier for, if they're saying, okay, there's some wood rot on the south side of the house. If the wood rot was like just this much wood rot, that seems way less scarier if he's showing you like it's just this one little corner here, like in that like one board there, than saying there's wood rot on the south side of the house and there's more wood rot on the west side of the house, and that's just being able to actually see it. If it is an inspector that doesn't walk around, feel free after you get the summary to either ask them to walk you around the house and show you some of that stuff. Totally, your client is paying for it and it's totally acceptable for you to do that, or to go look yourself. but don't be afraid to do that. And again, your client has not bought a home before or hasn't bought one for a while. And so they need to, just like when you're showing houses, they kind of need to be granted permission that it's okay for them to say, could you show us on that main stack what you were talking about exactly? Because I don't think I'm understanding what you're saying. Okay, so typically though, the report summary is going to just have those high level things that are wrong with it. And it's going to just be like the bullet points of what those things are. And so they're going to read through each of that. My process was to print out this summary level one, and then whenever we were discussing what we were going to ask for, and I would make my notes on this instead of all of the details. So this is what a kind of a summary will look like, and it's pretty consistent across inspectors. It'll look similar to that. And then once you get into the actual report is where they're going to include pictures. And so if there is an issue, they're going to include pictures of what that issue looks like. When you're drawing up your resolution for unacceptable conditions and you're asking for repairs, I highly recommend that you reference, if there's numbers involved, 2.9 or 2.10, seller to have licensed and insured contractor do XYZ. Please reference 2.10 of inspection report, or page 14 to 51 on the inspection report. So be as detailed as possible, so that everybody's clear on what you're referencing there. As far as when the inspection is going on and you're going through this inspection report, again, like this inspector wouldn't have it printed out. Some of them will print out pictures for you. Otherwise, you are a positive person. You've got a smile on your face. Your body language is very much so expressing like, I'm calm, this is normal. But you are, regardless, you've got a notebook, you've got a way to take notes while the inspector is talking, because they're going to go through every single defect in this property in many ways. Like the sidewalk is uneven, will be noted, because technically they have to point that out. It's a defect in the property. So oftentimes your client's going to be, again, like listening, and their eyes are getting bigger and they're nodding and they're nodding. And they get to the end and it's like, okay, I don't really remember anything that he said, or I'm just really overwhelmed. That was a lot of stuff. If you are able to take notes of just the major things that are of concern, not the sidewalk trip hazard, but that there's a broken seal in one of the windows, or there's wood rot on, and you're taking notes of the bigger items, you can say, no worries, guys, here's what I had as my notes, is what I thought was something that we should be aware of. And you're letting them know that you're already on it, like you're already on like what the major things are, and to say, hey, he's gonna send us the inspection report within 24 hours. We have time to take a look at that before we have to send over our resolution, which ends at this time, kind of a thing. Does that make sense? You've got time, but you being positive and you taking notes as a buyer's agent, just as well as the listing agent, helps calm them down to, like, that they know, and you can even read back to them. What I heard was like major to be concerned of was like really like that the gutters, were a little loose and undersized, and maybe, or those kinds of things. Does anyone have questions on, it takes a little practice and it takes some time to realize what those big items are and what not to be concerned with. But I really just would try to take, the roof is really old, or the anything electrical for me, because it sometimes is like a different language for me. I would slow the inspector down and take really good notes. Okay, so you said the breaker for the air conditioner was oversized because it's this size amp and it needs to be what size amp? I would slow them down and ask for them to clarify for me, so that I was easy for me to go take that to an electrician instead of trying to read what the inspection report verbiage is. Does that make sense? Or any of that electrical stuff. Sometimes there's reverse polarity, which is a very simple thing, but I would often make sure that I completely understood what was being said there. And I wouldn't dwell on some of that stuff, but but slowing down to make sure, especially if you're the one who's going to be helping get bids, is definitely okay to do. All right, so that's like inspections. At that point, you like, all right, guys, well, that was fun. We'll head out. Sometimes it's always helpful, like little other things with inspections. Sometimes it's helpful to bring snacks or water or encourage food, because a 4.5 hour inspection, if you weren't expecting it and that expectation wasn't set, or the timing wasn't right, and your client has been there since 1 o'clock and they rushed out of work and so they didn't really get to get lunch. Sometimes they would say, hey guys, why don't you go grab some lunch and come back? He's not gonna be ready for the summary. until 3:30. So you guys can go grab something and come back if you'd like, or to bring water or snack or something. There's nothing worse than having clients listen to the summary of every defect in the home they're about to buy when they're hangry. It doesn't help the situation. And you yourself to be thoughtful too on your own food intake. I know I harp on food a lot, guys, but it is an important part of the process. Okay, that's what I have for, oh, okay, I was gonna show you guys too, because I wanna make sure that I was gonna show you the inspection documents. So let's look at that. This is not the right one. There we go. Okay, has anyone seen an inspection notice before? So this is what you're going to send over at the completion of inspections, notifying the sellers of how your client wants to proceed. The seller name, buyer name, property, obvious. Effective date of the contract date, everybody signs the contract. Line 7 here is where you're going to check if there's wood destroying insects on that termite inspection report. And then you've got what your buyer's options are. So buyer agrees to accept the property in its present condition. You can click whether or not, or you can check whether or not they did inspections or if they did not conduct inspections. The second box here is if you're canceling the contract. You do have to attach copies of your inspection reports. And then the third is if you want to offer to renegotiate. The buyers are going to sign and date here, and then you're going to fill out here that your delivery method. So your delivery method would be via email or via DocuSign to seller, the listing agent, date. I oftentimes would put something like the date and then prior to 9 p.m. because I didn't know when my buyers were going to sign, and then you sign it there. Okay, any questions on the inspection notice? All right, let's rock and roll over to the really fun one, the resolution of unacceptable conditions. All right, I love that these are recorded, guys. It does give me some really high anxiety because it's being recorded on how to fill these things out. So, but I'm going to tell you what any experienced agent's going to tell you. Same kind of thing, buyer, seller, property, effective date. Here is where on line 12, you can check this box that you would like the seller to make repairs to the property. Again, I would highly recommend that you're using as much detail as possible. You are going to say things if you want a specific contractor to do it. Seller will have, you know, such and such roofing company complete these repairs, and you're wanting to include as much detail as possible, and then referencing an inspection report where. I can tell you there is nothing more frustrating than to get a resolution as a listing agent and it to be vague and for it to be really hard to understand what exactly is the buyer asking us to do. It also oftentimes leads to things not getting done the way that the buyer is expecting them to be done. And then you're 2 days before closing and everyone's upset because they didn't actually fix the wood rot to the way that they expected them to fix it. So if it is replace wood rot, paint or caulk, paint, you need to say all of those things in your resolution to make sure that you're covering all your bases. The expectation is that the seller is going to repair the wood rot, caulk, seal, and paint to match current, you know, exterior color. Does that make sense and how direct and clear we're going to be? If you don't have a contractor to do the electrical work, you're going to include seller to have licensed and insured electrician do X, Y, and Z. That way it's not Joe, you know, Uncle Joe Bob coming in and he kind of does some electrical stuff on the side, and then you have no warranty if something goes wrong with it. Okay. Sometimes, guys, even if you don't have a lot of things, but you're including a lot of detail, it's not going to fit on these lines. It is acceptable for you to say see addendum or see, addendum, because it's going to be 2, and then you'll have another document that you create in Google Word that says addendum to resolution of unacceptable conditions. You're adding again seller, buyer, property name, effective date, and to list all the things out on a separate document and just reference it here specifically. See addendum A to resolution of unacceptable conditions. At the bottom here on line 30, you're going to reference what additional number of pages are part of this agreement. That's going to be your inspection pages, and if there's an additional addendum like that. Any questions there? I'm going to pause for 1 second. All right. I do miss seeing all your lovely faces, guys. I can't wait to see you guys again on Tuesday. Okay. On line 32 is where we're going to say we want to do an adjustment in the price or other terms. That's where you're going to ask for a reduction in the purchase price or a credit towards closing costs. Let me explain what the differences are between the two of those. Sometimes you're going to have a buyer that's like, hey, Elizabeth, this house, unfortunately, the roof is shot. Sellers didn't know it. They were innocent in it. They're playing along and they're okay with the fact that they need to put a new roof on it, but we don't have a lot of time before closing. And I'm completely comfortable with putting the roof on myself. And they've got so they either are in a position where they've got all the cash to do said repair themselves and can handle it themselves. And so reducing the price would be just fine. So instead of $475 that we offered, the roof we've got a bid for the roof to be $10,000 to keep our math simple. So instead of $475, let's just reduce the price to $465 and we'll take care of the roof after closing. Now, there'll be other times where someone will say, and that's fine because they've got the $10,000 in cash. Okay, so another example, Elizabeth, it looks like there is a $30,000 or $3,000 repair for the sewer line. Sellers are being cool and they understand. They didn't know it. We didn't know it. They're willing to give us money for the $3,000 for the sewer line repair. And yet again, we don't have time to do it before closing. We're okay with taking that on ourselves, but we don't have an additional $3,000 to do it. But we're okay with managing it and taking care of it after closing. In that sense, you don't want to just reduce the price $3,000 because it's not helping your buyers. They're not going to have $3,000 more cash. Their loan's $3,000 less. So over the next 30 years, they owe $3,000 less, but that's not helping them get the cash to do it right now. So you might in that instance say, okay, sellers, how about we have you pay $3,000 of the buyer's closing costs, which will free up cash for the buyer because they no longer have to bring that cash to closing. And they can use that $3,000 they're going to put down for closing costs to go towards repairing the sewer line. Does that make sense, guys? Why you would do it that way? Awesome. I'm going to assume that it does. Okay, couple things to watch for here. Remember on our closing costs, it's use it or lose it, and it doesn't change in this example. If you've already negotiated that they get $4,000 in closing costs, you wouldn't want to increase the closing costs by another $3,000 because there's no way they'll use a total of $7,000 in closing costs. And so that would be a time that I would watch. And if you've already got closing costs involved or their closing costs aren't going to get to be that number, you need to be aware of that because same kind of thing, you get to the closing table. If you've negotiated $4,000 in closing costs, which you would say because on this line, you're going to say what it was for a total of. So if you already negotiated $4,000 at time of contract and you would negotiate another $3,000 because of the sewer line, so a total of $7,000, which you'd put on line 40. If you get to the closing table and their closing costs only end up being $5,000, too bad, so sad. Sellers get to keep the additional $2,000 and your buyers are looking at you like, wait a minute, hold on. Like that math didn't work out, Elizabeth, what happened here? So just be aware of that. Okay, second page of this is just where we're all kind of some more verbiage there. So I wanted to make sure I was clear on expressing that when it comes to the resolution. One other note, and this is what makes me a little anxious, is be careful in what you're including on the resolution sometimes. The only time you're going to give it to the lender is if there is a change here under number 2 to the price or the closing costs, because they need to know that so they can adjust their loan documents. And also the appraiser is going to get a copy of that. So sometimes what some agents will do is they're going to, when they come to terms on what exactly repairs are going to be done, and if there's repairs to be done, in addition to adjustments to the price or terms, they will say, how about this, listing agent? I'm going to send you over a resolution changing the price, or I'm going to send over a resolution with our repairs in the bottom changing the price, and I'm going to send you an additional amendment that shows that our price will now reflect $270 or $465. And the reason being, so they're going to spell it out in the resolution and then they're going to do a separate amendment, and that's so that they can just send the amendment to the lender and keep it clean. Well, I'm going to just leave it at that, and Randy can come put me in realtor jail. No, Randy can no. It's common practice. So as a listing agent, if you hear that too, that's not something that's unheard of. Lenders very much so appreciate that, because again, if you give this to a lender and that says, here are the 6 things that they're going to do, one of which is foundation repair, or one of which is X, Y, all of a sudden, and here are the additional pages, then the appraiser or the underwriter can ask for a copy of that inspection. And sometimes that opens up a huge can of worms, depending on who the lender is that you're working with. Sometimes you do, like if a new roof is getting put on, yes, your lender needs to know about that. And your lender is going to want a final inspection with the appraisal showing that the new roof was put on. Does that make sense? I know I just kind of talk circles. So when you get into that situation is when you say, hey, I want help. Can you talk me through how I should handle this situation to best protect my client? All right, I think I'm officially done with inspections, guys. That's inspections. It's easy peasy. It's beautiful. It's my least favorite part of the whole real estate transaction, were inspections. And oftentimes when I had like multiple clients and inspections, I'd be a little cranky because it can be stressful. Okay, any questions from anybody? Is everybody awake? Can you guys just like, we're all still?
I'm still awake.
I'm awake,
Okay.
no questions.
Yeah, because I'm not thorough, guys. Appreciate it. Oh, I always feel a little silly in all that I'm sharing. Okay, let's move on to the appraisal process. So I am not going to go all the way through an appraisal and reading an appraisal. I really want to more talk a little bit, both on the sell side and on the buy side, on how that appraisal process works. We talked a little bit before. As a buyer's agent, the appraisal is ordered by the lender. The lender does not get to specify exactly which appraiser goes out and does the appraisal. That lender, that company, the mortgage company themselves, the lender themselves, that whole group has a list of approved appraisers, okay? But it's not like your lender can say, I want Bob to go out on this one, because Bob really knows the Prairie Village area and he's going to do a good job appraising it. Bob might be one of the ones on the list that gets sent out, but they can't pick out the specific lender. Now, what they can do, and if there's ever in a time where an appraiser comes back and does a really bad job and is clearly like not working with good ethics or something of that sort, the lender can do like blacklist them. So they can say to their bosses, hey, let's pull Bob off the approved appraiser list because he totally did not appraise this properly. He didn't use comps he should have used, that kind of a thing. Does that make sense on how the appraisal process works? Your client's going to put possibly a deposit down before the appraisal is ordered. So typically you go under contract, and then when it's time to order the appraisal, the lender may very well say, buyer, I need a deposit like on your credit card for this appraisal. Some lenders do not require an appraisal deposit. The reason they do that is if for some reason it doesn't appraise and your client wants to cancel the contract, or if you're doing it prior to inspections, that they cancel the contract, they want to make sure they're covered and that they're not on the hook for the cost of the appraisal. We talked a little bit before about how we want to, as a buyer's agent, if we have time in our transaction, and a lot of times in busy season and just in general lately, appraisers are taking a while to get out there, right? So they're going to put in the order for it, it'll get assigned, but it might take 2 weeks for an appraiser to get out there and get the report back in. So if we've got a 30-day close or something of that sort, or quicker for sure, the lender is going to say, hey, Elizabeth, I know you like to wait until you're through inspections, but I am really anxious about getting the appraisal back in time for us to have, get that loan approval when we need to have it. I'm going to go ahead and put the order in, and then I'll put a pause on it. So at least I've got my appraisal in the queue, and I'll put a pause on it until you give me the go ahead, kind of a thing. Other times, if you're going fast and furious and there's some holidays involved, you might have to do the appraisal before you're done with the inspections. It's just kind of the lay of the land when things are moving as quick as they are these days. So really, as a buyer's agent, you don't have a whole lot to do when it comes to the appraisal. The only thing I'd note as a buyer's agent is if you do have an FHA or a VA, and more FHA than VA, but there's something that might definitely get called out, you could very well negotiate that in your initial inspection or in your initial contract. A good example would be peeling paint or railings that that this deck doesn't have a railing on it, or something that will get called out, or there's junction boxes without covers on it, which is a super inexpensive thing to fix. You may negotiate in your initial contract that the seller put covers on junction boxes here and here, and seller to install a railing to the basement. And the reason being is that way you can, and prior to appraisal, but that way the appraiser can come out, those things are already in place and he's not having to do a second visit, which takes more time and costs your client more money. The other is so initial contract or inspections. So there's sometimes too where I don't want to cause a big fuss during the initial contract because I'm trying to get my VA or my FHA client accepted. And then during inspections, I say, hey guys, we're willing to pay for the railing to the basement. It doesn't have to be pretty. I mean, it can be a 2x4, like stapled, you know, like screwed to the wall. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't even have to stay up after closing. You can remove it after closing. But sometimes you can say either seller, I want you to do X, Y, and Z for the FHA contract so we don't get it called out, or my buyer is willing to pay for someone to come do X, Y, and Z so that we don't have to pay another time for someone to come out and do it. Note on peeling paint with FHA, it's like what I like to tell people. Oddly enough, there can't be peeling paint. And if they scrape off the paint and the paint chips and it's like built before 1979 to where that paint might contain lead, there can't be paint chips on the ground. So make sure that when they're scraping the paint that they put a tarp down so that they can get rid of the paint chips whenever like they're done. Other thing on that is the paint does not have to match the house. So I've had before and I've seen before where people have bought homes in which they're going to paint the entire house exterior and it didn't match up or whatnot. And they're like, and or we're just trying to get the deal done. They go and chip off the chip paint and then they paint it back like white when the house is, you know, green. And that works, which to me doesn't make sense. But anyhow, okay, so that would be the only thing as a buyer's agent to be really aware of when it comes to the appraisal. Otherwise, the appraisal is really more in the hands. Oh, and I'm sorry, we talked about this the other day and the importance of the layering or the order of the contract. So as a buyer's agent, when you turn in the contract to the lender, counteroffer on top if it exists. Then we've got the actual sales contract. If there's an escalatory clause, we want to have that like at the top. Reason being so that they know exactly how much they're supposed to appraise it for. Sometimes I've seen where people just put the documents all in some random order and then send it over to the lender, and those lenders get busy. And sometimes they miss that there was a counteroffer, and instead of appraising it for the $250 you sold it for, they think they're only supposed to appraise it for the original $230 offer you made. And it really throws things off. So just be sure to make sure that you've got your contract in the correct order, sending it over to the lender and doing it in a timely fashion so that the appraiser has it. Same thing with if there's an amendment because you're going to change the price and or closing costs. You want to make sure to get that over to in a timely fashion to the lender. So really, I think it's more of a listing agent conversation, and I want to share with you guys now some of that stuff that we'll go through when let me get to the right screen. Okay, info on appraiser. So I do have and I'm going to share it right now. So again, I have another email template that goes out to the sellers on the appraisal, just setting expectations, because there's sometimes I was getting a lot of the same questions across the board from multiple sellers. So I just put together a appraisal email template that I sent out to them. A couple notes here. They'll ask if they need to be present to meet the appraiser. Again, I often encourage them not to be present. I'm not as concerned about animals being there. Appraisers are usually in and out within 20-30 minutes, if that, and they're okay if there's a dog barking or if there's a cat roaming around or a friendly dog roaming around or a dog is in a certain room. They often will ask if they should have the house show ready. And depending on where in the process they are, I often would, and depending on how much you sell it for. So the times that I would sell something for like way more than anything else has ever sold for in the neighborhood, I would beg my sellers, please, 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 let's leave it as close as we can to show ready, because I need to sell this sucker to this appraiser for as much as possible. And or it's okay if it's not perfectly show ready, but let's not just have the place completely trashed. Other times where it's like, I'm not real worried about the value on this one. if you're packing and you've got boxes, like an appraiser is going to understand, and really an appraiser is really only appraising the house itself, not the belongings. And they will all say, like, we always see beyond the condition of the house. But I will say, if your house is like in perfect mint condition and it looks that way because you sold it for like so much more, I do think, in my heart, I believe that does help. Anywho, they often do understand though, if you're packing and if there's boxes and if everything isn't perfect. Most of the time, there's just those couple instances where you're like, if we can leave it as much as we can, like, please do. Also, if it doesn't appraise because you sold it for so much and you have to go back on the market, it's helpful if your clients haven't completely let it go, the condition of it go, for them to get it back show ready so you can put it back on the market. Oftentimes they're going to say, all right, we got to get a copy of the appraisal as a seller, and the answer to that is hopefully not. And or do we know what the amount it appraised for? And I would always respond with, hopefully we don't, because if you do find out, it's because it didn't appraise for contract value. So as a listing agent, you're waiting for it to come back and for them to say it came in at a value and there were no conditions. And what I mean by conditions are, those are where if it's an FHA or a VA, the appraiser saying there's open junction boxes in the attic that need to be covered, a handrail to the basement needs to be added. That's a condition. Okay, so this is what I send out to the sellers ahead of time. Oftentimes as a listing agent, you are going to get a phone call from the appraiser and they're going to say, hey, Elizabeth, I'm getting ready to call. I'm calling to do the appraisal on 5710 Central Street. I have an iBox key, so it looks like it's vacant. I'm going to swing by. I can swing by on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Does that sound good? And I would encourage you as a listing agent to be very active in the transaction. And so oftentimes, as awkward as it would be, I would have to say to the appraiser, actually, like, my sellers and I had a conversation, they would really prefer for me to be present. I'm not far from the property. And so like 10 a.m. on Wednesday sounds great for me. And if you want, I can be flexible. And if you want to just give me a call when you're on the way, I could be sure to be there and let you in. Some of them will be a little bit resistant to this. The reason being is appraisers will have 3 or 4 different, what they call inspections. They're not doing a full inspection of the home. They're just walking the property. If it's FHA or VA, they are turning on water. They're checking for those junction boxes and those kinds of things. But they're going to line up 3 or 4 of those maybe in a day. And sometimes they get to the first one and it's like way bigger than they expected, or measuring it took a lot longer than they expected, or they got there a little bit late, or a homeowner was there and was super chatty with them. And so it's nice for them to have some like flexibility in their schedule, to where it's like, okay, I had my first one scheduled for 9 and then it took forever. And so I thought I'd be here by 11, and yet now I'm not going to be here till 11:30, or they got done with the first one earlier. So if they can just come by in their leisure, they appreciate that and they would prefer to do that. And so sometimes it's a little bit of a battle to get them to agree to let you be present. But I would be kind, friendly, and just say, it's just really important to my sellers that I be present. I'm going to stay out of your way. So does 10 o'clock still work for you? And again, you can message me when you're on your way. And I then block out extra time in my calendar to make sure I can go early if he needs to go early, he or she needs to go early, or I can go late if he or she needs to go late. Okay. Then the day of the inspection or of the appraisal, I would highly recommend that you do what is called, I've done this before, or I do this all the time, an appraisal cover letter. And so I would put together an appraisal packet as the listing agent. You've heard me say many a times, like, I, as a listing agent, want to try to do all that I can to make the job of the buyer's agent easier, of the lender, of the appraiser easier. And I want to do all I can to make sure I'm representing all of the things, right? So the cover letter, it was the same cover letter I used every single time. I think you guys have gotten used to my templates, to where I would just change the address, the date, address. And in it, I would just say, so the contract packet included this cover letter. It includes a list of improvements for the property. It also included a copy of the MLS sheet, a group of appraisal comps that supported the value. And as you see here in my and then it also included a copy of the contract. Okay, so let me walk through a little bit of why I'm including each of those things. This is the cover letter. I used it as an opportunity to express what interest we had in the property, And to soften a little bit, it was nice that I would paper clip all of this together, and then I use little flags to denote list of improvements, supporting comps, and then copy of contract. And I just paper clipped it all together, which kind of softened me, not just being like, here's some comps, you don't know what you're doing, which can be very offensive. So like including all of that in a nice professional way helps soften the I'm giving you comps to support what I sold it for. Okay, so this cover letter would be where I just included these comps that I'm including are just supporting our sales price. And then they're all within the last within 1 mile and within the last year. Now, if they were within half a mile and the last 6 months, I'm going to adjust that here in this paragraph. I also then would include what going on the market looked like. So the house was on the market for 2 days. We had 67 showings. We ended up with 7 offers, 5 of which were above asking price. You want a copy of any of those other offers, I'd be more than happy to provide them to you. The times that you can include as much of that information as possible, the appraisers truly appreciate it. And this being on a printed document is helpful because they can include it in their appraisal and help justify why your house sold for so much above asking. And it does help them tremendously. So many times they're like, thank you so much. That is so very helpful. So that's what the cover letter kind of looks like. I've had agents before ask me, what happens if I didn't have multiple offers? What happens if I didn't have 33 showings? Well, you just exclude that paragraph and you don't include it. So you still include all of the rest of the stuff. But all right, so the list of improvements, a lot of times this is just where I want to make sure that they're not missing. If there was a ton of improvements, I would separate them out from like exterior and interior. But I just want to make sure that there's things that they're not missing that would affect the value of the appraisal. So like fences or additional patios, those kinds of things. And then for the appraisal comps, so I would go in and here's what the MLS sheet was for this particular property. I included that just for convenience for the appraiser. And then you're going to want to go in and pick out comps that help support your sales price. And so it's interesting, and like, well, with the appraisal, you don't want to just do all comps that are bigger, more than yours, right? An appraiser is going to pull comps, and what they're going to do is called like sandwich the property. So they're going to include some properties that were much bigger or nicer and that they had to make adjustments to the value of to bring it down to match your property. And what I mean by adjustments, if there's your property, like for example, this property was 1,800 square feet. They may well go take in 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. They might go get a property that is 2,100 square feet and then adjust down for the smaller square footage. So take value away from that one. So that one might have sold for, let's say, 220,000, and they're going to take some value away because it had more square footage than yours. So they're going to take some value away to take care of the fact that the square footage was different and bring the property down so it matched more with yours. So they're going to adjust it down. They adjust it down for things like square footage, for bedrooms, for bathrooms, for condition, for if it had a patio and a deck and yours only had a deck, kind of a thing. Then you also have where you want to bring a property that maybe is smaller, less good of a condition, priced for less, that they're going to adjust up and say, well, so this 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath only had 1-car garage. And so I'm going to make some adjustments because yours had 2-car garage, and they're going to want to bring it up. So you want to sandwich it. You don't want to just do ones that are all so much higher, kind of a thing. And you want to do stuff that's like property. So you try to find things, if it's a split, you're going to find a split, a similar split. You're not going to include a bunch of 2 stories when you've got a split level, just because those all sold for more. Same with like a ranch. You want to do ranch comps as much as possible to match it up. So I would just include, and I literally, you know how much I love this 1-page print, this version of the printing because I knew it, right, like just perfectly. But you're going to just include all of your comps there, again, in another section with a little flag on it that says comps. And then finally, I included a full copy of the contract. You all get, I think, 500 free black and white copies through the office. So printing it out, I know, trees, #trees. And yet the times that this was super helpful were the times that an appraiser, I would say, okay, you've got a copy of the contract, yes? And they go, oh no, I haven't gotten one from the lender yet. And you're like, oh, okay, well here, I've got one for you. And they're so grateful because that means they can go home and they can finish their report. They've got a copy of the contract. They don't have to wait to get it back from the lender. The other reason is a listing agent, we're going to be good buyer's agents and we're going to send our contracts to our lenders in the correct order. And yet we can't control all the agents we work with, and some of them are not the professionals that you are. So by having it there, I'm able to say, and you know that today we're going to be appraising, it's for the 221, right? And they can say, oh yeah, yep, I got 221, or they can say, oh no, I'm sorry, I had it here in my notes as I'm only appraising until this is an old contract for 212. So I can clarify that right then and there as the listing agent while I'm still on the property with them. A couple other times it's been like, and today this is an FHA. So and they'll go, oh, okay, oh, it's FHA. Okay, I'm so glad you told me that. I need to go pop my head in the attic, or I need to turn the water on and test those things. And you're saving yourself a trip and helping it be more efficient for them there as well. The other thing with the copy of the contract, I also would include any amendments. If we changed anything, like I said before, if we changed anything in the price or closing cost, I'm bringing a copy of that every single time. And the appraiser is always so very grateful, because if he doesn't know about the change in the contract price or the closing cost, and he or she does their report and turns it into the lender's going to turn it around and give it right back to him and say, hey, I need you to adjust the closing cost in the summary part here of your report. And all that back and forth, guys, takes time, and it's holding you up from getting the clear to close and getting to closing. And all of that stuff is those little details can really help a transaction be so much smoother. So that's kind of the overall summary of your inspection or your appraisal kind of process. If there are any questions for you guys when it comes to when you're at the appraisal appointment, again, we're always like helpful, kind, helpful. Oftentimes I would get there early. I'm unlocking the front door. I'm turning on all the lights, because the appraiser is going to come and typically they'll measure the exterior of the property. And then they're going to come in and take photos and then measure any of the interior property that they couldn't measure from the outside. But I got all the lights on for them, so it's real quick and easy for them to come through and take their photos. And I would have my appraisal packet with me, and either I would like body language read and say, hey, here, I put this together for you, and I do my little spiel about we had 33 showings and 7 offers, 5 of which were above ask, kind of a thing, and have that conversation. And then I would say, hey, well, I'll stay out of your way and I'll get the lights, don't you worry about it, kind of a thing. No, you cannot be in their photos. So be very thoughtful of letting them take their photos and you not being in them. So oftentimes, like, I would be around the corner and being very thoughtful that I'm staying out of their photos so I'm not causing them more time. The other thing I would highly encourage you to do with your appraisers is read their personality. Some appraisers over the years were no nonsense. They want to get in. They're number people. That's why they don't sell houses. That's why they appraise houses. They're not people. They want to just do their job and get out of there. Let them do their job and get out of there. Do not chit chat with them more than necessary. You will have other appraisers that you'll bump into time and time again that are talkers, and you just talk to them. And you have a good conversation with them, and it's a part of that too. A lot of times the appraiser is going to tell you if there are going to be any conditions, or they're concerned about value in that conversation sometimes, where they're going to say, Elizabeth, good job on selling this one. I looked at comps before I came. I'm kind of struggling with where the value is on this one, kind of a thing. Do you know of anything off market that wasn't in the MLS, a for sale by owner or something that might have sold? And they're going to kind of give you an update or a heads up that it may not come in at value. Or sometimes they're going to give you a heads up like, hey, Elizabeth, I'm going to put a condition in there about that railing, down to the basement, and, the junction boxes, which is super helpful as a listing agent, because you get to come out of that appointment and go ahead and get started on making those repairs for those conditions so that you can get them back out there quicker to remove the conditions from the appraisal. It's also super helpful if they give you a heads up that there might be a concern with the appraisal, because just like the inspection, you get to get in your car and call your sellers and say, hey guys, I'm a little anxious about the appraisal. He did say, that he was a little worried about it. So this is not a slam dunk. Keep your fingers crossed for me. He said it was due on, next Tuesday, and then he'd be turning it in on Monday. So that would be a good idea. And those are things that you can ask when you're there too. Do you know when the due date is on this one, or when you think you might have it in? On the appraisal, you as the listing agent are going to be kind of at the mercy then waiting for the lender, the buyer's lender, to get that back in. You can call and check in with the buyer's agent and say, hey, have you heard he was out there last Tuesday. It's now the following week, Thursday. Have you heard anything on the appraisal yet? Or you can follow up with the buyer's agent. That buyer's agent is not being responsive. After a certain point, it is acceptable for you to call the lender directly and say, hey, have you seen anything on that appraisal yet? So give the buyer's agent a chance to do it. If they're not being responsive, it's okay for you to step over, like, to the side of them and go ask the lender directly, have you seen anything on the appraisal? All right, that's appraisals. And that's the whole like gamut, a little bit or a lot of it as an agent. And it's noon.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
You are very welcome, guys. I appreciate you. You're very welcome. Okay, I will see you guys then on Tuesday. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You have my cell, so please feel free to reach out to me if you guys need anything.
All right, have fun in Florida.
Right? Yes, I'm super excited I'm grateful to have made it here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, see you Tuesday.
All right, sounds good. Thanks,
Bye.
Krista. Bye.